My next guest, the Director of Defense Studies at the Center for the National Interest, Harry Kazianis, joining us once again here on the Chad Hasty Show. Harry, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good morning, my friend. How's it going?
Going great. Appreciate you joining us today. I was going to email you earlier in the week, but of course with the primary, all of that would be covered up with primary news. But this North Korean, I guess, outreach, maybe, if you want to call it that, is certainly interesting. But how much of it is believable?
I don't think any of it. I think, honestly, the more I keep thinking about it, the more I think it's a trap. The North Koreans have a history of doing things like this. This is really just the old North Korean playbook with a little bit of fresh paint, a little bit of wax, nice and shiny and ready to go and to give to President Trump. The North Koreans have done this so many times. What they will do is they will raise international tensions, whether it's, building nuclear reactors and testing nuclear weapons or testing missiles, and then they bring the world to the brink. And then all of a sudden, Chad, they say, oh, my God, let's talk. Let's have a conversation. We'll offer to, quote-unquote, denuclearize. And then what happens, Chad? We go through months of years of negotiations. We have arguments over the size of the table of the negotiations. We have arguments about what we're going to talk about at the talks. And then you know what happens? Nothing happens, except for one thing. The North Korean missiles and nuclear programs get better and better as the years go on. So honestly, I think this is just more of the same.
So is this South Korea buying into what North Korea is selling right now, or are they just playing along with the game?
Well, the South Koreans, you have to really feel for them because, they're right next to this whole challenge. And what makes it worse, it's their own brethren, it's their own families, their own people that have been divided by decades and decades. So you have to give them credit for trying, and they have to try. If I was them, I would do the same thing. The challenge here is that we're not actually hearing these kind words, these good vibes from the North Koreans themselves. So far, it's just been the South Koreans paraphrasing what the North Koreans have told them. We're going to know today or tomorrow if this is actually a real something that we should have hope for. Apparently, the North Koreans have given some sort of message to give to the Trump administration. It's been in reports for a few days. So if the contents of that message are released to the public, we'll have an idea of what this is. But it seems like administration officials, Rex Tillerson today already said it, that, they're hopeful, but the North Koreans are really going to have to put out a lot of signs. And the administration really at this point is just talking about talks about talks. So they've sort of dialed back the optimism a little bit, and I think that's good.
What do you think we need to see, or what can the public, if there is anything that the public can maybe see to go, okay, this is real? Because I'm with you. When I started hearing these, this talk that North Korea is ready to give up their nuclear weapons, and as long as they feel as though they're protected, I don't believe it. I don't believe it for a second. But what are some signs maybe that North Korea would be serious?
They'd have to put out a roadmap. They'd have to say, okay, if we have successful talks in 60 days, we'll let international inspectors in. There's no way they're going to do that. In 6 months, we'll destroy one class of missiles. They're not going to do that. In a year or 2 years, we'll start dismantling some of our nuclear weapons. They're never going to do that. So I think really what this is a play for time. The reason I say that is the North Koreans are so close to developing missiles that can go all the way and hit the U.S. homeland with nuclear weapons. They're months away from that. The intelligence community has said that over and over again in public statements. So I think what Kim Jong-un is going to do, he's going to take the next couple months, stretch these negotiations out, keep working in the lab with his mad scientists to try to figure out those last pieces they need, specifically warheads that can go through the atmosphere and develop and hit a target. And then you know what? The talks are mysteriously going to fail, and then North Korea is going to test that missile that can go through the atmosphere. And then we'll know we've been duped. They've done it before. They're going to do it again.
Let's say this administration, hopefully, is smarter than previous administrations that have been duped. Do you think there's any chance they meet with North Korea?
Sure. I think that, Mike Pence, Rex Tillerson, even the president themselves have all said they'd be willing to sit down and talk. And you know what? Talk is fine. Talk is cheap. You lose nothing by talking. But what this administration needs to do is immediately say, okay, North Korea, you've almost brought us to the brink of war. What are you going to do to get out of this situation? Because you're the one who caused this problem. It was not the United States. And if North Korea just does what it normally does and tries to stall, tries to backtrack, then we'll know what the game is, and you just keep applying more pressure until they're sincere. That's how you do it.
Yeah, I know you wrote a piece for Fox News, an opinion piece, that Trump needs to test North Korea's intentions now. How do you do that, or can you do that in a delicate manner that doesn't set off North Korea firing a missile over Japan?
Probably can't, to be honest with you. But I mean, I'm optimistic, but I think you go to them and say, okay, you've committed to denuclearization. What is your plan? How are you going to do that? And I think one of the first things you say is, okay, the world is very concerned about how many armaments you have, what type of missiles you have, how big your nuclear facilities are. Remember, almost every other country on the planet has their nuclear facilities monitored by the Atomic Energy Commission. Say, okay, time to send the inspectors in, Kim Jong-un. Let's see what you have. That's a very small step that they can do. If they even balk at that, forget it.
Visiting with Harry Kazianis here on the Chad Hasty Show. One of the North Korean, I guess, at least what was reported, conditions to get rid of their nuclear weapons, if this fantasy is actually real, would be that they get to stay in power, that nothing gets to happen to the government, that they are assured their safety. One, is that really what North Korea wants, or do they want a unified Korea? Two, is there any way that the international community can let this regime stand, knowing that they imprison thousands, if not more than that, in these political prisons or concentration camps? Can we really sit by and allow that to happen?
Well, these are all the tough questions, Chad. To your first point, the North Koreans talk in code a lot of the times. And a lot of times they'll say things like, as long as our security is guaranteed. Well, that can mean a lot of different things. One of the things the North Koreans have said for decades is that U.S. troops need to leave South Korea. That's a non-starter. That's one of the things that guarantees South Korea's security. So we're never going to do that. The other thing that they want is they want to be recognized as a full-fledged nuclear power. In other words, saying that it's okay to have nuclear weapons. We're never going to do that either. So they always try to talk in code and talk in these very broad statements. They've even said before, we'll denuclearize if you denuclearize as well. That might be another trap that they throw out there in the next couple of days. So we've seen all this before. As to your point about the regime and allowing the regime to stay in power, I honestly think, Chad, the long-term scenario that's even more frightening than all of this is North Korea will eventually collapse. Countries like this that slaughter their own people, that have 100,000 people plus in political prison camps, that have absolutely no future, and large portions of the population are starving to death, they don't last forever. The outside world is slowly permeating into North Korea. And someday, who knows, a month, a decade from now, you'll see that country slowly start to rot. If it happened with the Soviet Union, who had 40,000 nuclear weapons, I think the same could happen with North Korea.
The president the other day was asked, why he thought North Korea was coming to the table and at least making these overtures through South Korea. And he jokingly said, me. And the room kind of laughed a little bit, but he said the sanctions. Sanctions have been really putting a lot of pressure on North Korea, and China has been putting a lot more pressure on North Korea, but they can do more. Do you think that the sanctions are working as intended? And two, what more can China do to, maybe push North Korea along?
I think the sanctions have been effective, and I think the president is right to take a victory lap, because it has been his hard work and it has been this administration that have really pushed this issue to be the top foreign policy issue. And you have to remember, no other administration would do that. The Obama administration had strategic patience, which means they basically punted on it. The Bush administration was overeager to talk to the North Koreans, and they really never made it the top issue. So Trump has really put political capital into this issue. He's put skin in the game. And I think that's one of the reasons why this has moved along so quickly. Now, this is where it all gets a lot more difficult in terms of, will the North Koreans, look for ways to get these sanctions removed? And I think that's one of the things they're trying to come to the table right now, because, to be honest, in the past, anytime the North Koreans have come to the table, we've given them something. In fact, back in 2009, Chad, they wanted a $10 billion bribe to have a summit with the South. Those are the things we can't do again.
Before we let you go, I know the Olympics were weeks ago, but any thoughts over the show that we saw between the North and the South, and of course, the sister who went and received all the praise?
the North Koreans get the gold medal for propaganda on that one, I have to say. I mean, look, the South Koreans were kind of stuck. If they didn't invite the North Koreans after Kim Jong-un sort of reached out with his peace overture, the North Koreans would have probably wrecked the Olympics in some way. I could just see them testing an ICBM the day of the opening ceremonies or a few days before, and then everybody cancels all their hotel registrations, and the Olympics is destroyed. So South Korea was kind of stuck, but it was disgusting nonetheless.
Yeah. Harry Kazianis, Director of Defense Studies at the Center for the National Interest. Always appreciate your time and your insight. And I'm sure we will visit again soon with all the North Korean news.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's Harry Kazianis here on the Chad Hasty Show, Director of Defense Studies at the Center for National Interest. Obviously knows a lot about North Korea and the games they play. Chad Hasty Show, KFYO.